So, welcome to Oh Brother, Not Another Podcast, presented by Verso Studios at the Westport Library and available on all your favorite podcast platforms like Apple and Google and Amazon and Spotify and wherever you find them. And my name is Miggs Burrows.
And I'm Trace Burrows. And today on our show, we have Clea Soderlund Newman and her husband, Kurt, who are very involved in the charitable organizations that Paul Newman started a few decades ago, as well as the new memoir that came out about Paul Newman called The Extraordinary Life of an Ordinary Man. And then there's the series on HBO Max called The Last Hollywood Stars. So we'll just get into it and discuss all this stuff. Maybe you have a starting question?
Well, yeah. Well, I have we both, we grew up in Westport, lived here before your parents did, but in 1950. But anyway, so, and we've run into, this is kind of a towny question, but we had our run-ins with Paul and Joanne. My mother actually was friends with Joanne from the Remarkable Bookstore. I mean, they, were bookstore friends. And anyway, but so the question I have, occasionally I would see Paul, and Trace has had the same experience at Heyday or some public place, and people were very respectful, of his presence and not badgering him or running. But sometimes he would call out, like he'd be across the room at the end of the thing and go, "How much are these tomatoes?" And everybody would look. I mean, was that something you experienced, or was that just something? Was he being playful? I mean, it was fun to know. Everyone would look and say, "Who's yelling about the tomatoes?" But
I guess he just wanted to know the deal with the tomatoes.
He was supposed to get home and bring home the tomatoes, and he needed to leave, and he probably didn't want to make his way across the wherever. Right. Or maybe he didn't have his glasses and he couldn't see how much they cost or if they were the right tomatoes.
It was almost like he wasn't aware of his own celebrity, which was very charming in a way. Yeah.
That too, probably.
Yeah.
So the organization Series Fund Camps, I knew of Hole in the Wall camps. Is that like an umbrella organization that covers all those different camps, or are there different kinds of camps within that?
Well, Hole in the Wall Gang Camp is our first camp. And then the Serious Fun Children's Network is the network of all of our camps, including Hole in the Wall. And all of our camps are named different things. So like our camp in California is called Painted Turtle. Our camp in France is called Laval. Our camp in Ireland is Barrettstown. Our camp in Florida is Boggy Creek. So the support center, which is within the network, supports all of the camps, and I'm the ambassador for the support center. So I get the greatest job in the world. I get to support all the camps.
And all the camps basically have the same function, or there's different camps?
Oh, I travel all over the world supporting the camps.
Yeah.
So from raising money to speaking at events to hosting things to working with, corporate donors and big foundations, and it's really fun. And I get to hang out with the kids and the families all the time. So,
and what is?
I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, what is Safe Water organization? What is that all about?
Yeah, so Safe Water Network started about 15 years ago with Paul, and he was always interested in environmental issues. He enjoyed both, water being kind of at the center of a lot of issues, and even more so today, given climate issues, public health issues, and access to safe water, critical component of healthy communities, livelihoods, enormous impact on women, girls who are unfortunately often disadvantaged as it relates to having responsibility for collecting water. There's about 2 billion people globally who don't have access to safe water the way that we're familiar with. It's enormous, profound in terms of how that compromises health and livelihoods. And so the focus has been on it's solvable. There's, the technology is there. There's often funding and resources, not enough, but what happens too often is that there's, investment in providing a system in a community, focus on infrastructure. And unfortunately, in most of these fragile markets, 30 to 60% of that infrastructure fails within 2, 3, 4 years. So you're left with a lot of failed projects around the world, and it's because of a lack of focus on sustainability, keeping the systems running, providing the training, providing financial incentives locally so that they keep running, focus on water quality so people aren't just getting water, but they're getting safe water. And so our focus has been on solving that as an example and a model in 2 countries, Ghana and India, where we've invested significant time and resources to build out at scale programs in those geographies.
Does those governments help you out, or are they just sort of hands off?
Yeah, no, we work very closely with the governments. In fact, providing policies, advisory work, so that we get the policy structures right. How do you provide simple case? How do you price water? People have got to pay a little bit to keep it, affordable and equitable access, but you got to pay something to keep it running. And how does the government provide some form of subsidies and ongoing support to ensure that this can scale up? So we work hand in hand with them. We work, in fact, some cases we provide some training and support, service support to government entities, both local and regional and national level. So that's a critical part of what we're doing. Otherwise it's one project at a time. And our goal is to, provide a model that can be replicated and scale with the large stakeholders and players that are, critical to reaching the 2 billion people in need.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I read in one of the, I don't know if it was in your interview, but anyway, and I thought it's just cute to hear. It's called in India, water aunties.
Yes. Yeah.
Water aunties.
That gets to the point about the gender issue, right? So we focused a lot on how to enable and encourage and support women in these communities to build the skills, the capabilities, and the kind of the whole support system in these communities to be successful in delivering solutions. So a big part of that is, get them to focus on water quality, yes, and make sure that they've got the tools and skills to ensure sustainable, safe water access. So it's critical. It's getting the woman engaged is the path to success ultimately.
Right. So the book, the memoir that just came out, I guess, a month or so ago, and did you? Yeah, I mean, showing the book. So as a question, I guess, for Clea, more for both of you, really, like when those notes that were taken that your dad kind of gave up on the memoir, but they were out there, a lot of material, I guess, in interviews with friends and business associates. Did you learn stuff about your dad that you never did know based on that?
I think
that's a yes. We're just listening to this.
I definitely learned quite a bit about my dad, but a lot of I think the things that most surprised me were just how complicated his childhood was. I mean, I knew it was complicated, and I knew what a difficult relationship he had with his mom, and even with his father in some ways, but I had no idea how complicated it was. And I think that was really tricky. And regarding the transcripts were kind of a weird phenomenon. We had all been interviewed. There were 100 interviews that were done by Stuart Stern. And the whole point of it was that Dad wanted everybody to be incredibly honest. And I think it was this really kind of intricate journey for him, almost like a therapeutic journey for him. And they were socked away, but we didn't know where they were. And Stuart had asked us about it every time Kurt and I would go out and visit. He would talk about the transcripts and how
Stuart
Stern, yeah. And he would talk about, maybe we should give them to Yale. So it wasn't something that was kind of hidden. We just didn't know where they were. And it wasn't until my mom's house was being painted that we found all of the transcripts carefully organized in two tall file cabinets down in the laundry room with a bunch of boxes in front of them. Mm-hmm. And when we found them, we didn't.
And this is the laundry room of an old house in the basement. So you're going down these creepy stairs with a light bulb with a string on it. It's not as if you've got.
It's not. Well, no, it's like a beautiful old antique house, but but you know how those basements are, right? It's it's not totally finished, and anyway. So they were down there, and we found them probably about a year before COVID. But those were all the other interviews, but Dad's transcripts were not in that. So we were reading through all of them. Mm-hmm. Not myself, but actually my best friend Emily, who was one of the producers on The Last Movie Stars, also was the one that actually found the transcripts downstairs, because she was organizing, trying to move stuff around so that the painters could paint.
Gee, what a find.
So, anyway, we then were moving a bunch of stuff into Mom's storage unit, and sitting, behind a couple of other boxes were Dad's transcripts in two big boxes that said PLN history. And when we found those, once we started reading through them, which again was a big education, and as Lissy would say, would have made for some really interesting conversations over the dinner table, which would be true. It was really clear that he wanted them to dispel the fairy tale. And it was a difficult decision for us. I mean, it was not something that we took on lightly. And then, we remembered seeing that actually in Dad's will, it says, if there's any interest in doing, a book on me or my memoir, I'm, as Dad would put it, I'm okay with it. Which is typical of Dad, would just be like, yeah, whatever. So
you had his permission, basically, yeah.
Well, we had his permission, but it was not something that we took lightly. But we really did feel like it was his wish, and we wanted to abide by his wish.
What would be the reluctance of you not doing it? I mean, what were the things that you had to consider to move that forward? That you said there was a lot of discussion about it before it happened.
Well, it's I don't know if you've read it, but it's not the fluffy version.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's real and raw and hard, and he's very honest, and dispelling the fairy tale was hard because most people thought everything in my parents' life was perfect, and that my father had this perfect life, and nobody's life is perfect. Everybody's life is complicated.
Yeah.
And in some ways it almost seemed healthy to put out the real story about Dad, and that he continued to evolve and grow and become an even, better version of himself as he got older. And, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. He continued to create. He started Safe Water Network when he was in his late 70s. Mm. He never stopped doing stuff. And and giving back and being creative and working in films and, you know, being a great grandfather. And
I think Lissy said in her talk that he would, and she meant this in a positive way, that he was a natural born hustler. Because the movie The Hustler, but she wasn't referring that he was resourceful and constantly,
oh yeah,
you know. And I think there was a thing, and I don't know if she said it, but there was a reference to something in college where he set up a bar in a car, right? He set up, there was his car, I think, and he sold drinks, so people pay him $5 and they go in his car and they could drink and then leave because there was no drinking allowed in the frat house or something.
well, even better than that. Kurt, do you remember that story about him starting? He found a small storefront in the main drag, in wherever Kenyon is.
Yeah.
And he put some washing machines and dryers in there.
It was better than that, actually, in some ways, because more creative. He created a space where he would give people beer and they would provide their laundry. And then he found women in town to do the laundry. So I never have to invest in anything beyond a keg or two of beer. He outsourced. He was way ahead of the game in terms of outsourcing. He outsourced the laundry, and everyone came. It was a social thing, and you know. So I don't know. I would say it was a hustler. I'd say it was just he had great entrepreneurial instinct, and he had fun. Yeah, he enjoyed things, and he enjoyed the discovery process of that, and doing things that you know, take chances on things, and that was pretty. You know, I think a modest beginning, the laundry room.
But he made a killing. He made a ton of money.
Yeah. Well, the inference was that if he never became a movie star, he would get by. I mean, he wasn't like it's do or die. You know, he would find a way. But I wanted this is sort of a poignant quote from the book. I just pulled a few, but we'll talk. This was the first one. It says, "I don't have the gift of fathering." So, I mean, this is a tough one for a daughter to answer, but in your mind, does that ring true? Or was he was obviously a good father in ways?
I think he had difficulty in the beginning, certainly. I mean, I'm the youngest of six, so I think by the time I came around, you know, by the time I was born, he was 40. By the time I was, you know, an interesting little person that he would want to hang out with, you know, he was in, you know, almost 50 years old, and so I think it was maybe a little bit easier for me. But he, you know, he had a hard time in the beginning. I mean, I remember, you know, I mean, all the stories are true. He, you know, he drank a lot. He did some crazy stuff, but I give him a lot of credit because he, you know, like I said, he continued to evolve. And by the time I really needed him as a young teenager, and you know, when I started having, like, you know, whatever crisis you have as a teenager in my 20s or whatever, he was 110% in. And so he continued to work really hard to be a better parent and be more present. And he never stopped working on it, which...
It probably just speaks of his self-doubt, which is a theme throughout the book. The frustration of not being able to connect to mentors, teachers, parents. He said, you know, in these interviews, I don't know, it was this connection thing. And then there was this other, I think it's his description. He said there was always the conflict of the ornament versus the orphan, right?
What is that?
Does that describe what he? Like he felt like an ornament, like everyone's, you know, he's a sparkly ornament, and yet inside he felt alone, like an orphan. Is that?
That's pretty. I mean, I would say that's pretty much it. But it really started from his childhood because you know, he really felt like his mother, and he even says it in the book that his mother wouldn't have even spent any energy or time on him if he hadn't been a pretty little boy. And so, you know, he fought that for most of his life until he got to be an older man. And if you look at his work, even as an actor, I mean, his best roles are, The Verdict.
Yeah.
Once he started looking a little bit not quite as Adonis-like, and he started looking like, he started looking like
Yeah.
a beautiful older man. He could kind of dig deeper, and he didn't feel like he was the ornament anymore.
I think that's also
in the HBO series, and it was interesting. I mean, he was always, for me, he was always like, enjoyable, and he always seemed real in his parts. But I could see in The Verdict that there was like more depth to his acting. Was that your idea, or the children, your siblings, to do that series, or were you approached by some producer?
Just one quick thing on that series and this point, which I think one of the most poignant moments of it is he's asked, does he identify more as being Jewish or Christian, because his parents both, and his answer was, he sort of thought about it, not an immediate response. Says, I Jewish because it's more challenging or more difficult.
Oh, yes.
It's just harder. It's just harder. And I thought that was pretty profound, and I think it also captures kind of he forever took on he could have gone the much easier road in a lot of things.
He likes challenges.
And he took on more challenges and I mean, a much more interesting life path and more challenge, as did Joanne. I mean, just remarkable in terms of their commitment to give back to the arts, the crafts, the people that were in their orbit. And that was, I think, part of what makes them remarkable and, more complicated individuals, because when you go the tougher path, you face challenges that are different than kind of just doing the easy stuff. And I think they both really made commitments to challenging work that makes, necessary to make a difference.
Go ahead, Megan.
So I have I want to show you a picture, and it's showing off a bit, but there's a question attached to it. So I took this picture of your parents in.
I remember you did.
In
the birdhouses, right?
Yeah. Did he eat well? I mean, was he into nutrition? I mean, no, beside the popcorn and the tomato sauce.
He did, but he was not a big eater, and he worked out like crazy. I mean, for the amount of exercise that he did, even into his 80s. I mean, we were always like trying to cram food into him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was. I mean, he ate healthy. He just, he would eat half of his meal, and he would work out for like 2 hours on the first climber.
I mean, if I drank a can of beer, I'd gain 5 pounds. He just didn't seem to affect him at all.
Well, if you worked out as hard as he did, yeah, I mean, he really did.
He was crazy fit.
He was crazy
and
fit.
Disciplined about it.
I mean, like every day.
I don't know if you answered this already, so I apologize. I already had. So was it your idea the kids' idea to do the film, the series, or did a producer approach you and said, we'd like to do a series on your dad and your mom, basically?
Well, it started with Emily. And initially we were going to do a film on my mother, but we found that we really couldn't do a film on mom without dad. And then it became this kind of whole new animal. And Emily, we tried to find the right director. There were some, bobbles along the way. And then Emily called me and said, what about Ethan Hawke? Kurt and I watched one of his documentaries that he had done, about that wonderful one that he did on the piano teacher, pianist. And it was so interesting. And so Emily said to me, well, you have to call him.
Yeah. We
went to school with him in boarding school.
Oh.
So I called him, and poor Ethan he had no idea why I was calling him. And so I said, so great to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. Listen, we have this idea. Would you like to, do a story, like a documentary on my parents? And he told me later, he's like, I kept trying to say no. And I found myself going, yes, absolutely. I couldn't imagine not doing it. And the poor guy spent the 2 years during COVID working on it, like a dog.
Great as sort of the connector of the different segments because he's very enthusiastic about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful project. There's so much material, and the way that he told the story, I thought was brilliant. Threw a lot of their clips together, and so the only weird thing is just doing doing the whole process via Zoom was really strange, but but it was kind of cool because Kurt and I had just sold our house, and so we had moved into the barn on my parents' property, which was really cool because doing it while we were living there, it just, we were kind of like living and breathing the family. Maybe a little too much for Kurt, but it was.
Where did you meet?
Where did we meet?
Yeah.
We met in town through a mutual friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here in town?
Here in Westport. Yeah. I was living in New York and working in Westport.
Right.
And grew up in Easton, so I'm familiar with the area too. And
I live in Reading. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you related to Carl Soderlund, the artist?
That would be my brother.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Very accomplished artist. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you do do you dabble in the
So I've done one painting that's across the
Oh, really?
I did only one, and it was just sort of the passing of two dogs that were Clea's for many years, and so I did a little impressionistic that maybe a kindergartner could have done, but I'm not sure.
It's amazing. He's actually very creative, and he does amazing doodles.
Yeah. Your dad did great doodles.
Dad did great doodles.
He did doodles too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And the funniest, that's how my parents used to communicate with each other a lot when Dad would, go out and take the dog out for a walk, and he'd make this little doodle with a little note. There was like him, stick figure, walking the dog, and then a poop, and then him saying, I picked the poop, or whatever. It was just,
Yeah.
So,
the foundation, I get it's Newman's Own. How many products do they have by now? Hundreds?
Honestly, I don't know.
There's at least 10, 12 different salad dressings. But so are they helpful with these charities? They help support the camps and the safe water efforts you've been making?
They do.
That's good.
To cross over. I mean, they kind of, they fund.
They still do. It's a little awkward because the family's not really involved anymore with Newman's Own, but they are supportive of the camps and safe water.
Yeah, I had another sort of a more practical question about safe water. So, what are the solutions? Is it purification? Are there mechanicals involved? Systems, mechanics, pumps, pipelines, and
Think of a small water plant in a community, but some of them, the largest one is maybe a community of 4,000 people with connections to every home. So there's on one end of the extreme, there's that. On the other end is a very small water processing facility that then dispenses the water. People get it in 20-liter jerry cans. So think of it as 5-gallon buckets. Closed buckets, and they pay a modest amount. We keep it very affordable, and it's keeping that infrastructure running. The service side of it, training the technicians, training the operators, the community engagement, how to ensure that the communities are fully bought into it, invested in it. Educated on it. One of the early projects we did where it really came to life to me how important that piece of it is. One of the first water systems we put in Ghana got a call, and these communities, the small villages have grown into larger communities. So what might have been 2 or 3 small villages is now one larger community. And I got a call saying that one part of the community, that the chiefs there were disappointed that the water facility was on the other side of the different community, and they'd arrested all the people doing the construction. So there's a lot of local diplomacy that goes into doing this work. A lot of soft side of it, not just the infrastructure.
It's not unlike here trying to get something built, and who you're nice to and who you have to slip up a few dollars to, and I guess the world goes round. What's your favorite? If you're allowed to say, do you have a favorite bottled water that your go-to bottled water?
That's a bad idea, because I think in general, this idea of hauling water around the world and the costs and the plastic and the rest of it is not sustainable, and probably, I mean, in certain situations it's important to have access to, but I think all of us could probably remember growing up and this thing Perrier all of a sudden being like, who's going to put money for Perrier? I mean, and now it's all over. I mean, it's just you
dozens
can't.
of waters. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how many waters? And then it turns out that New York tap water was voted the best, in a blind taste test. This was several years ago, but New York tap water was number one.
Clea's father wanted to. In seriousness,
this was serious.
He wanted to bottle New York tap water and call it New York tap water.
It was called New York's Own. I think it was called it New York's Own or something.
Oh, that would have been great.
And just to remind the world that the water out of your tap ain't half bad.
That's right. Yeah,
we drink water out of the tap. Like, we don't.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, sometimes I use that little flavoring, those little squeeze bottles of flavoring first. But yeah, I do.
I have well water, so I don't have to worry about rust if that happens.
Oh yeah,
that's true. Well, we had well water growing up forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in our houses in Westport, we always had well water. Yeah.
Well,
the one thing is you were not allowed to take long showers.
Yeah.
You didn't have one of those buckets on a thing, though.
Not quite like that.
In my old house, we couldn't take a shower and wash dishes at the same time.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It was hard with a lot of girls, too. That was tricky.
Yeah. You have to draw straws.
So this is sort of, I don't know, provocative question, but Paul's first wife is your family, your sisters. Have you met his first wife, or are you friendly with them, or it's a whole nother world and you don't connect?
So Jackie just passed away 2 years ago. It's so hard to remember because it happened during COVID, and I always feel like COVID just, like everything kind of runs together. I mean, we grew up with our other siblings. I mean, I will say that my mom tried very, very hard to create a family of all of us. She tried to interact with Jackie. I met Jackie when I was little. I didn't really meet her much, but she lived in California and we were pretty much here, unless we were in school. Occasionally when my parents were working in LA. I mean, we tried not to be in LA as much as we could possibly not be there. So any excuse to come back to Connecticut. I mean, we used to come back even for Thanksgiving. And in those days, that was not a small trip to bring like a whole family with the dogs and everything, like back for 4 days. And but we pretty much didn't like being in LA. So any chance to get out of there, we did.
Yeah, it sounds like your mother was the connector that your father struggled to be, maybe. It seemed like she was the tried to be more inclusive, and or it was easier for her, maybe. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, she just, mom kind of had the secret sauce of, you know, she was the hostess with the mostest, and I don't mean that in a, you know, kind of snotty way. She was just like this constantly warm, inclusive person, and she tried really hard to make sure that all of our siblings, you know, that we knew that all of us were together, and she was happy to bring all of us together all the time. In fact, I remember she, and even my girlfriend, like all my friends and my sister's friends and stuff, you know, my mother used to take us when we were kids to Disneyland, like, you know, in California. And my mother by herself would go with like 20 kids by herself.
Yeah.
And she loved it. She was, you know, she was just, I mean, she was really good at kind of managing lots of little people. and she liked doing it, you know. So whereas my dad, you know, he just didn't kind of know how to interact. Mom was just kind of, she was just a natural. Even though she says she wasn't, if you listen to her in the docuseries, she was totally a natural.
Yeah.
Well, you know.
So do you have are there any new projects on the horizon, either charitable work or the show business stuff?
I don't know. I'm pretty exhausted.
You're doing a lot of interviews, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, this isn't really my strong suit. So like, I did an interview in Chicago, and somebody asked me, why didn't you become an actress? And I said, because I'm terrified of speaking in front of lots of people. And she looked, she goes, is this considered a lot of people? I said, yes.
All right. Well, we'll let you go. Thank you. It's very, we don't want to put you on any more stress, but we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
It was fascinating.
And the book is Paul Newman, The Extraordinary Life of an Ordinary Man, and Safe Water Network. And
the series is The Last Hollywood Movie Stars, right? That's the title.
And Serious Fun Children's Network, and, you know, the Hole in the Wall Gang Camp. There's so many great things that your family's done. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. This was fun.
Good.
Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend, a great holiday.
You too.
Bye.
All right.